Hello everybody. If you're new to this channel, my name's Coach Butler. I'm a strength and conditioning coach. And if you are a returning subscriber, this is going to be a video that breaks down my exact thought processes and my system for training when I make people training programs. Now, typically when I make these video lectures, they're more informal, and I kind of don't look at the slides very closely. I kind of just look at the bullet points and talk. But we're going to go through everything here item by item, just so that you can have a very comprehensive and direct guide from A to Z with how to create your own program based on my thought processes. Now, this doesn't necessarily negate me making the decisions for you, obviously, because if you hire me to think for you, make decisions for you, that's a different experience. But this will give you the tools to be able to make better decisions and to kind of just give you an idea of a complete training system that doesn't just use one training method versus another. The Berserk Method is named after my favorite manga, Berserk. The main character in that, Guts, if you don't care about Japanese animation or comics, succinctly, he is an individual that uses every means to win whatever battle he's in. So by that same token, my training system is a training system that combines elements from pretty much everything that I've consumed content-wise over the past 12 years, the valuable parts of it, and combines it into a comprehensive system that gives you the best of everything. I found a lot of success with this method, the Berserk Method, in my own training, obviously, as well as in the training of my clients. This goes from people who want to train powerlifting, people who want to train bodybuilding, people who train for holistic purposes, so on and so forth. We're going to go right into the table of contents, go through everything item by item. These are all important pieces of, I guess, not information, but prompts that I go through mentally when I make people's training programs. So everything starts with a conversation regarding their rehab, their prehab history in relation to their specific injuries. Before we even talk about that, though, especially if you're training the bench press, the squat, the deadlift, the overhead press, so on and so forth, you want to determine what their joint angles are. And by joint angles, I essentially mean the range of motion that they go through relative to their body. So you could be a shorter individual but have limb lengths and torso sizes such that when you reach the bottom of the bench press where you touch your chest, your upper arm is below parallel with relation to the floor. So your joint angle is going to be less advantaged than someone that could be much taller than you, and they have limb lengths relative in such a way that their arms, their upper arms, are above parallel or parallel when they're at the bottom of the bench press. These things are all very important in selecting not only the frequency at which you do those exercises, but the volume, the intensity, what accessories you need, so on and so forth. With that, though, obviously is going to come any injuries that they have related to exercise or that could be aggravated with exercise. So if you encounter someone or you yourself don't have any injuries, you're off to a great start. However, it's very common for someone to have at least one injury throughout the course of their training career or just from life in general. So that's something that I always determine preeminently before we start making any programming decisions, obviously, once I've already selected for what their individual range of motion is on, squat, bench, deadlift, overhead press. Rehab is everything. So knowing how to navigate that injury, not only in terms of your exercise selection, but rehabilitating it. Look, guys, I'm not a doctor. More than likely, if you're watching this, you're not a doctor. However, you are the first line of defense, so to speak, before you consult your doctor. So just like you wouldn't call a doctor if you scraped your knee, you're going to dress the wound yourself. You're going to use whatever antiseptic ointments that you need to use to clean the wound out. You're going to bandage it. Likewise, if you get hurt in the gym, provided that it's not like a life-sustaining injury or a life, something where you could die or you're seriously hurt, you don't necessarily need to consult your doctor. And that's not medical advice. I'm not giving you medical advice. This is just all my experience. You can choose to do with it what you choose. From there, after we determine the prehab and the rehab stuff, you have to gauge their current performance levels. This isn't, oh, this is what I could do 3 blocks ago. Oh, this is what I did in high school. What can you do now? Performance comes in many metrics that we'll talk about specifically when we get to that slide, but you have to see where they're at to then start off with preeminent loads, meaning, you're going to program them at a specific percentage where you need to know what their best is. Determining volume tolerance is more or less going to allow you to look at whatever training split you're looking to make and then decide volume allocation. So in other words, how many sets of bench press am I going to do? How many sets of squat am I going to do? How many sets of accessories am I going to do? So on and so forth. It's really important to know that if you're someone that doesn't need much volume, just to grow at the beginning of a training program, that you know that so that you don't program over that amount. Likewise, if you're someone that needs a lot of volume or can tolerate a lot of volume, you program accordingly because everybody's different. From there, after you get all of the onboarding information, so to speak, you start to look at assigning accessories in the order in which you do those exercises. After we go through all that, and it's just more so explaining the ins and outs of my thought processes, we're going to describe what a typical Berserk Method training split is. We're going to go from there to not only defining primary and secondary days, but how you would arrange them based on individual ranges of motion, what lifts you're primarily training, so on and so forth. From there, we'll go through determining progression on those primary and secondary days. Progression on your lifts is going to change in terms of the way that you do it, depending upon what the lift is, depending upon how you're using it, what intensity it is, how long you've been doing it. There's a lot that goes into it, but I have kind of a blanketed approach that I take, so to speak. So obviously you change things depending upon what the person needs, but typically for main lifts we progress this way, for accessory lifts this way, for isolations this way. We kind of talked about this, what is the Berserk Method, just in my introduction. Obviously, as I stated, it's my defined system and thought process when making training programs. So by watching this video, I am, and I'm not a charlatan by any means, so it doesn't hurt me to put this program out because I believe that you should put in twice as much value into your audience, to people that you want to consume your content, for them to be able to give you any value back, right? You have to have an equivalent exchange of value. You have to know that you have to be confident that whomever's content that you're consuming, that they're competent, that they know what they're doing. And not only that, this is my passion, A lot of people say that, but they don't really, their actions don't reflect that. So my goal overall is to raise the average knowledge level of a trainee, just so that if they do decide to enter a coaching relationship, they have more confidence in their ability, not only A, to work collaboratively with them, but B, just to make sure that, if they're giving someone their hard-earned money, that it's going to an individual that can help them manage their training well. In terms of specific mechanisms that are used in it, I combine step loading, classic linear progression, heavy singles, bodybuilding strategies, so myo reps, drop sets, things like that, along with RPE plus percentage-based prescriptions that can come with either or both. And we'll kind of talk about that when the time comes later in the lecture. Another big thing that I think sets me apart in terms of just generic programming is that typically when you have someone making training programs, the generic prescription may be, oh, if your triceps are your triceps are lagging on bench press, you just do like a neutral grip, close grip bench press to improve your triceps. That's not necessarily what you always want to do. And my question is, when people make those prescriptions, is why are you making them? I always ask myself why I prescribe something to someone. It's obvious, just if you take training and then you replace it with a doctor, your doctor has to have a reason for prescribing you a drug, for prescribing you a treatment, and a goal in mind with it. So I'm always thinking three things: technical, muscular, and mindset strengthening. Some people have mental blocks that prevent them from being able to perform in a certain capacity. There are variations and exercises that can be used for that, which will also give them a little muscular carryover. A lot of accessories can be used in at least 2 or 3 categories all at the same time, but you always want to have a primary purpose in mind for it. Likewise, there are variations that are just generally very good bodybuilding movements, so they'll put a lot of muscle on you when you recover from them. And then there are exercises that obviously enforce technique. You have to know why you're using something and when to use it and at what level you need to use it, what capacity, at what intensity, and then how long you're going to do it. All these things I keep in mind when I prescribe accessories. One thing that is really cool about the Berserk Method, because referring back to the source material that I got the name from, that guy could just fight for days without sleep, without eating. It was just crazy how long he could go for. And with that in mind, I wanted to kind of honor that by, in my training system, having a periodization style that just keeps your work capacity really high, or will build it if it's not the greatest. Just because physical fitness should always be, honestly, we lift weights to be physically fit. So just being able to exercise and not be out of breath and just be generally physically fit and have a healthy heart, those are all really important. And that's something that I did not want to neglect in favor of strength. Obviously, it's maximized for strength potential as well in strength building, but it's not neglecting the other things that make you a complete, robust trainee. Likewise, with all the variation, with all the rep ranges, with all the rehab and the prehab work that gets, included into it if needed, it's also really good for injury prevention, but also injury rejuvenation. And this is in conjunction with whatever prescriptions that you get from your doctor as well. Like I said, I'm not a doctor. I'm not giving medical advice. However, there are ways in which you can exercise around an injury to rejuvenate that area. One thing that makes it really cool for when I have people that have powerlifting backgrounds is that it maintains optimal specificity to the nearest extent possible. So, meaning, instead of, say, just training squat, bench, and deadlift all the time, you're doing close variations of those things in select volumes along with other variations to keep it as specific as possible, where you're not changing everything all the time. But you also have enough variation to ensure that you're not going to experience any overuse. Like tendon snapping, bone fractures, just general fatigue, so on and so forth. Going right into the first point, this will all be time stamped for everybody so that you can go through each individual talking point and take notes. But the first things first, like I said in the introduction, I have to determine your joint angles on the main lifts. So determining your specific range of motion on power lifts in general is going to be a cornerstone in selecting your accessories. If you have a really long range of motion on bench press, your accessories are going to look different from someone who has a really short range of motion on their bench press, whether that is through just their natural range of motion or a compensatory strategy like arching that just shortens their range of motion. Meaning, I could prescribe you okay, so take two guys, make it real simple. Guy A has really long arms and a really long range of motion on bench press. He bench presses 400 pounds. Guy B, same bench press, way shorter range of motion. I could prescribe them both the exact same accessories, and one will see a lot more success than the other, just because what works for one did not work for the other based on their range of motion. So knowing that difference and being able to identify that is very important. For bench press, and we'll go through briefly what you want to look at, and this may be repeated later in the lecture just for repetition's sake and you understanding how important that is. But on bench press, what you look at when determining range of motion isn't the absolute range of motion, because that's going to vary depending upon how big they are, like how tall they are and how long their arms are relative to their height. You're going to look at the angle of their upper arm at the bottom of the bench press when the bar is on their chest. If it's parallel to the ground, it's a moderate range of motion bench press. If it's below parallel, it's a long range of motion bench press. And then finally, obviously, if it's above parallel to any degree, you have a shorter range of motion on your bench press. As far as deadlift, you're going to want to look at your torso angle when you're at the bottom of the deadlift. If you're really horizontal to the ground, your range of motion that your back has to go through is going to be really long, and thus you're going to have to pull the bar a lot farther. If it's really upright, your back's going to go through lower range of motion, and you're going to have to pull the bar lower. If it's somewhere in the middle, you have a moderate range of motion. And then for squat, it's kind of the same thing. If you can stay really upright when you're at the bottom of a squat, and we're not looking at the thigh angle, because parallel is parallel in terms of range of motion. We're looking at the back angle on squat. So if your back angle is really straight up and down, really erect, you don't have to go through too much back extension. You have very good leverages on squat, and you would have what I would consider to be good squatting leverages. Likewise, if you have a lot of back extension on your squat and your squats halfway look like good mornings, you don't have the best squat leverages or the most advantaged, because there is really no best or worst. Leverages to me just dictate how you need to train in order to progress. So just like anything else in life, what you need to be happy and what the next guy needs to be happy could be entirely different. But that, and then you trying to do what makes them happy to make you happy isn't going to make you happy, because you need something different. It's the same thing. Now that's just in terms of selecting your accessories. One thing that is also intrinsic to the inherent range of motion on an exercise is the frequency and the volume in which you can optimally train heavy. Heavy being defined as 80% or more of your 1 rep max. By that I mean, if you have a shorter range of motion on your squat, in terms of your not only your absolute range of motion, but the level of back extension you need to go through, you're going to be able to do more reps with a higher percentage. Same thing on deadlift. If you're a really advantaged sumo deadlifter, or you're a conventional puller and you have really long arms and you can stay really upright on a deadlift, you're going to be able to do more reps at a higher percentage, at higher volumes. And strength work is going to be a lot more, not necessarily productive, but it will be more fast-paced in terms of your progress, just because you can do it more often. Now, a note with that, though, is that strength and that progress is specific only to that lift. Meaning, if you're a really advantaged sumo puller and you're accustomed to pulling sets of 10 with 80%, which is very common, and then you go to do a conventional deadlift or just any variation that equalizes your leverages to a less advantaged lifter, you're not going to be able to train that lift with the same frequency, because the range of motion is longer, you're more disadvantaged, and the strength just isn't going to carry over. It's all specific to the lift, which is why we train. You're more than likely just on YouTube going to train the squat, the bench, or the deadlift, just because that's the era that YouTube has been in for years, or not even YouTube, just social media in general, gyms in general. Those are the 3 lifts we all mainly do. We all mainly try to get strong at. Another thing intrinsic to the range of motion is the proportion of accessory to assistance work that you can do versus the proportion at which you do the main exercise. Meaning, if you're really disadvantaged, you have a lot of range of motion on a deadlift, it would behoove you to do exercises other than the deadlift to increase your deadlift. As opposed to someone who is a really advantaged sumo puller, they'll still obviously need to do accessory work because everybody needs accessory work, but they can do a much larger proportion of just sumo deadlift to increase their sumo deadlift. Likewise, same thing on bench, same thing on every lift. The better you are at it, the more advantaged you are at it, the more you can abuse that lift and just use it less sparingly in your training programming. There are ways to work around that if you're a less advantaged lifter, though. And this is really important to talk about because to my recollection, I just was thinking in my head, who else has talked about this on YouTube or anywhere? And there hasn't been someone. But for every 2 or 3 sets of accessory work that you do as a less advantaged lifter, that will later in your training block leave room for you to do an extra set or 2 on your main variation. Meaning, let's just say you have really bad leverages on deadlift. You got really short arms, your body's parallel to the ground, your torso is rather. And you start off with doing 3 sets of deadlift at the beginning of the training cycle, and you do 3 sets of good mornings, 2 sets of dumbbell RDLs. Those good mornings and those dumbbell RDLs, although they are less stressful from a neurological aspect, there's still volume and tonnage in that movement pattern. So that work capacity, those 5 sets, are going to carry over as maybe 2 sets that you can do in deadlift later on that won't overtax your recovery because you've now built the work capacity to do that. So that's kind of a strategy that I use for people that are less advantaged, is I build their work capacity with things that don't beat them up as much, and then I use that acquired training capacity to then push their main lifts when it's required, because it just comes a time in training where you need to get more specific to acquire more strength in that lift. That's not to say that I don't do that for individuals that are advantaged in that lift. It's just at a different proportion, and we employ it at different times. And some people don't need to do it at all. Some people are so advantaged in squat, bench, or deadlift, or all 3, that they don't need a whole lot of variation. They can just do those things and get insanely muscular, insanely strong, and not need a lot of the other programming principles that everyone else does. The goal of this video is just to show you and to offer you discernment when you absorb other information. But it's mainly to show you the different strategies that each person can use depending upon their specific ranges of motion. We're going to describe just in later slides where we talk about specific accessories that a long range of motion bench presser would use and why, and then kind of tie it into why you may have heard something on YouTube that isn't necessarily not correct. It's just not applicable to everybody. And then also validating certain things that you may have heard for the same reason. One thing that I use there, just the last thing before we go on to the next slide, is with determining joint angles on the main lifts, you can use lower or larger ranges of motion on a variation to acquire either more hypertrophy, more volume at a higher intensity, or a combination of the two. But you don't want to ever venture more than one level up or down, meaning if you're a long range of motion bench presser, don't do really high pin presses and expect for it to have carryover to your bench press, because you just can't bridge the gap of range of motion because it's too much. However, if you were like a medium range of motion bench presser, you could benefit from something to where your range of motion is above parallel. Likewise, if you're a really large, you're a really short range of motion guy, you don't really want to overstretch your pecs, just because that's not that it's not, you can't do it per se, but you could get away with a lot less while getting carryover to your bench press. So on and so forth for the other lifts. That's regarding technical carryover, but also in terms of injury prevention. For example, if you're used to going through 6 inches of range of motion, and then you go through something that's 12 inches of range of motion, and you're doing a ton of volume for it, your body isn't accustomed to moving through that range of motion with under resistance, so you incur a higher risk of injury if you don't introduce it more gradually. Which a lot of people don't. You Google things, you say, oh, dips are good for bench press, and then they try dips and they've never stretched their pecs to that extent, and then they pop a pec or pop something in their shoulder and then wonder why it happened. That's why it happens. Kind of already covered this, but more advantaged lifters can train heavier with more reps per set. And this is regarding less heavy singles, but just more the heavy volume work. They can also do it at higher frequency and at a greater proportion of their main work to accessory work. And then for less advantaged lifters, the opposite is true. But like we said, they can use medium range of motion lifts like floor press, board press, pin press, parallel dips, parallel push-ups, so on and so forth, to garner a lot of the same benefits of the more advantaged lifter's natural range of motion. So if you're someone that has bad leverages, you can use a quote-unquote partial as a staple in your training program and get great carryover from it. That whole assertion that partials are just unilaterally bad is incorrect if you take it literally. I don't doubt that the people that say that are well-intentioned. However, they're saying something that can very easily be misapplied by someone that doesn't know what they're doing. The fact of the matter is, most people on YouTube who watch things like this, they are beginner level lifters that'll look at some strong guy, and no matter what they say or how in-depth they go in with things, if they're strong and they're, whatever, they're popular, they're going to take what they say to heart and then, not think critically on it. But my whole thing is that guys always think critically. Think critically of what I'm telling you now. So if something doesn't make sense, question it. Moving forward, these are just typical accessories that go really well with different ranges of motion on each specific lift. So a lot of the time with variations in accessories, you're going to want to have a variation that has as much range of motion as your natural range of motion. Some that have more, depending upon if you're short range of motion in your lift, and then a lot that have, and then a few that have less. So using the long range of motion bench presser, for example, dips are really good for, that's guys like me. I have a long range of motion on my bench press. Dips are really good because when you do them to depth, you get a nice full stretch on the bottom of the pecs. That's something that I can really uniquely utilize without a lot of sensitivity to it. Sensitivity, because I don't have sensitivity to that range of motion because my bench press is already like that. So I can, go right into doing like really decently loaded weighted dips, so on and so forth. Push-ups done to the same range of motion or, parallel are really good as well. All for movement variation and just to attack that range of motion from a different angle and through a different loading pattern, just to avoid overuse injury. When you're a long range of motion bench presser, especially, the muscles in your pec minor, your shoulder, your rotator cuff, everything in your upper body that has to do with pressing, your triceps get worked through a larger range of motion. You have to take care on using enough variation and then varying your range of motion as well with intelligent volume selection on each of those things, just to avoid injury. It's so much easier to snap a pec when you have to reach to Davy Jones' locker on your bench press, I like to say. Floor press is really good in a video that I'll probably link down below, because it's the great equalizer in terms of range of motion. Your upper arm is going to stop parallel with the ground no matter who you are. So if you are a long range of motion bench presser, you're going to be parallel with the ground, so on and so forth, if you're medium or short. That's really good for just subjecting your pecs to a range of motion that can still have like strength and size carryover for your regular bench press, while also putting them through less range of motion, so it's not as stressful. Board press is really good for the same reason. Floor press is kind of like a non-leg drive version of that though, and then the board press, obviously you can still use leg drive. Overhead press is really good for long range of motion guys too. Typically long range of motion guys, we use more of like a moderate grip width, so we can also then in turn use a moderate grip width on overhead press and get a lot of carryover just because our grip widths are comparable. And again, it also helps to just break up all the chest pressing volume, because we don't need as much as someone with lower range of motion, because we just have so much more of it. So we're getting more muscle breakdown and thus muscle building per rep than someone that has half or a quarter of our range of motion. It's kind of the difference between a full hamstrings on your calves squat versus a parallel squat or an above parallel squat. It's the exact same thing. Moving on to the short range of motion bench pressers though. Floor press is really good for guys like that because they are typically accustomed to pressing with less range of motion. Floor press is the great equalizer. It's the next level down, so it'll be a parallel range of motion bench press for them, and it gives them movement variability. Larson press is really good because they can use the same level of arch and thus more than likely are going to have a similar, if not slightly higher range of motion than their competition style lift, but it removes leg drive, so it trains those upper body muscles in a way specific to their regular bench press. It's not something that you typically hear talked about very often, just because long range of motion bench pressers are slightly more common. I would say you don't typically see the really advantaged bench pressers because, like, to be honest, they're made fun of a lot. That's not to say I'm making fun of you, because I don't care. However you want to lift is how you lift, but I'm just telling you how it is. Feet up bench is really good for kind of the same reason as the floor press, except for it's just a different feeling. So when you do a floor press as a long range of or short range of motion bench presser versus a feet up bench, obviously you're not getting leg drive on either, and the range of motion is more than likely the same. But when you do a floor press, your concentric and eccentric chain is being broken by the floor. Likewise, on a floor press, that's not happening. So it's just different variations that do slightly different things that you can use in the same slot. Dumbbell press, really good for just general bodybuilding work. You still need a developed chest if you expect to McDonald's arch 450 pounds. You can't not have any size. Tempo bench is really good just for subjecting that specific joint angle where you're really short in your range of motion to a lot of time under tension. It just shores up a lot of weaknesses, because a short range of motion bench press, it looks easy, and I'm not saying you can't use way more weight on it, but it's very technical, and if things don't go well, the whole lift just fails and it falls apart. Long range of motion deadlifters though, these guys typically get a lot of lower back fatigue from doing regular deadlifts, so they want to do things that either have a stretch reflex like an RDL, so they're easy to recover from, or something that lets them get more out of less weight. Guys like myself, I have a long range of motion on my deadlift. My back gets really parallel to the ground. It just has to do with my individual leverages. RDLs, stiff leg deadlifts, back extensions, direct hamstring work, all really good, because you're just having to use so much back extension on your conventional pull, and you're more than likely not going to get as much leg drive as someone else. So you just need a really strong posterior chain. It's not to say you don't need strong legs, because you do get a boost from just your quad drive. It's just that you have less of it because you're just look at your back angle. It's a lot more horizontal to the ground. Short range of motion deadlifters. You guys get to have a lot more fun in terms of your exercise selection, I would say. Simply because you get to do a lot of different things and get benefit from it versus like a longer range of motion guy. So belt squats done in your deadlift stance. So if you're a sumo deadlifter and you do the belt squats kind of wide, you're going to get really good carryover from that. Excuse me, I was coughing. Likewise, all low bar or hingy squats, although they are more hip hingy than a regular squat, they're going to be similar in joint angle as your sumo deadlift more than likely is. So when you look at someone that does like a low bar squat typically, and then you look at their sumo stance in terms of their back angle, it's very similar. And what a lot of guys will do that have those similar joint angles between their squat and their deadlift is that they'll use a lot of squatting volume in place of their deadlift volume when the time comes, like when they're tapering down, and you can't do everything all at once when you're tapering the volume down to just reduce fatigue. So that's something that they'll do. Rows are really good for the shorter range of motion guys, just simply because you have longer arms, so you have to take care to use a lot more lat to keep the bar close to your body versus someone with, and this is long relative to your other levers. Like I, for example, have long arms, but just because of the way the rest of my body is built, I still have a disadvantaged deadlift. If you have long arms relative to your other levers on your body, you need more lat to keep the bar closer to your body versus someone like myself who has relatively not shorter arms, but I don't need as much lat to keep the body close to my body, the bar close to my body. Good way of putting this is that I can do strict. I have the strictest barbell rows on YouTube that I've seen. I can strict row routinely over 2 plates. It's with no body English, no nothing, for 10 or more reps. However, I have the same deadlifts as someone who has a lot weaker of a row. And that's just simply because that I don't get the carryover for rows that someone else would. It's just an aesthetic exercise for me mostly. Then finally, just to go into like the squatters, starting with the large back extension squatters, it's kind of the same thing as the deadlift. You can't do it as much just because of how disadvantaged you are at it, and that lower body lifts are a lot more stressful than upper body lifts just because of the absolute poundages, the gigantic ranges of motion that you move it through. You guys are going to want to do a lot of leg machine work, so that's going to be full range of motion leg presses, full range of motion hack squats. I'm talking thighs to calves. That's what full range of motion is. Not slightly below parallel, not at parallel, below parallel, all the way down. Leg extensions, so on and so forth. Anything in the gym that's a leg machine, it's your new best friend. Full range of motion is your new best friend. Because on your regular squatting variation, it's probably, and it's typically very common for someone to have a lot of trouble reaching that full depth on a regular squat. They can get parallel, but going lower than that can be difficult. Likewise, since you have such a large extent of back extension in your squat, your deadlift is also going to feed that as well. And then the low back extension squatters, just anything that's quad dominant, front squats, pause squats, SSB squats, full range of motion, leg machine variations, belt squats. You just get to have a lot of fun. All right. So just a word on determining prehab and rehab. It's my next thought process. Determining existing injuries just helps with the process of elimination, mostly with your selection of accessories. So if someone tells me that they broke their back and it still kind of hurts, that obviously is going to eliminate a lot of variations. What it also does is that it gets my gears turning on things to include by default. So for that kind of individual, something like back extensions or good mornings or dumbbell Romanian deadlifts, anything like that that will help them work their posterior chain and their lower back muscles while also not subjecting them to a lot of axial loading is going to be something that I'm thinking about. Likewise, if someone tells me that, I get a lot of tendonitis when I bench press with a lot of volume, and they have long arms and they have a long range of motion, I'm going to look more towards exercises that kind of truncate the range of motion and limit their volume on like regular bench presses to the least extent possible. And then only, elevate that when necessary. Just to generically just talk about a few different, typical injuries people have when they lift weights or just from life in general. Back tweaks call for spinal decompression. So belt squats, weighted pull-ups, lat pull-downs, hook lying warm-ups where you lay on your back and then you prop your feet on the ground and you lay in a hook lying posture. Anything to help alleviate that pressure on your lower back is going to be really good, and it's going to be something that I just think about how I can fit into the three categories that I mentioned earlier: the muscular weakness, the technical weakness, and then the mindset weakness, and then also incorporating a fourth category, which is rehab and prehab. From there, you got your elbow tweaks. Reverse band work, like reverse band bench press, is going to be really good in getting blood pumped into that area because it's not vascular like your muscles are. Your tendons are not vascular portions of your body. They get really poor blood flow. Likewise, really light band work for a lot of reps that causes the least muscle disruption. So if you get any muscle disruption, meaning you get a muscle pump, basically, is like the Barney style classification of it. If you get any muscle pump from band work that you're doing, it's too heavy or you're doing too many reps. You want to get the area as warm as possible while also working the muscle the least. Knee tweaks also call for band work. So your patellar tendon, your quad tendon, anything like that. Band work, we're talking band leg extensions. Spanish squats are really good. Stationary bike, anything that puts your leg through extension and flexion repeatedly for a lot of reps without causing muscle disruption is going to alleviate the pain, one, and then two, just allow you over time to go through that range of motion free of pain. Hamstrings are a little different in that you just want to find what your comfortable range of motion is with regards to hinging at the hips or just flexing at the knee, and then work in that comfortable range of motion and then slowly over time graduate it. This is obviously after like the injury is healed and you're just in the process of alleviating pain, restoring a pain-free range of motion, and then breaking down scar tissue. So if you tore your hamstring off the bone, don't try to use it at all until it's healed, and you consult with your doctor. Stationary biking is good for hamstrings as well, because obviously when you put your foot out now and then extend your knee and then pull it back, what do you do when you pull it back? You put it through flexion. It's what you do on a hamstring curl or anything like that. Next from there, after I select for rehab and prehab, if necessary, when necessary, strength in many capacities needs to be determined. Starting with your 1 rep max, obviously, because you need to determine what your maximal strength is. But you need to also determine what your capacities are in other rep ranges so that you can program accordingly. Because 70% can be a 10 rep max for some people. For some people, it can be an 8 rep max. It just depends on factors that have other to do with your range of motion as well. It comes down to the combination of muscle fibers that you have, fast twitch versus slow twitch, so on and so forth. So 3 things: a 1 rep max, a 10 rep max, and a 5 rep max typically will give you a pretty good idea of people's capacities across the board. Performance also has to do with things other than strength. It comes down to, just like with the accessories, form, technical, performance, strength, and then how they talk about their form or their weaknesses, which is a mindset thing. Examining form and habits is, obviously there are things that you can preeminently, tell them like, hey, blah, 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 this is what you do on bench press. It also helps you to select for accessories to help with that as well, because sometimes they don't have a strong connection with a particular muscle that helps as a stabilizer in a lift. So for example, pause deadlifts are really good for someone who isn't adept at holding their bracing consistently on squat or deadlift. When you make them pause right off the ground, they have to keep that brace or they're punished for it, and then they're rewarded in being able to complete the rep if they actually do it correctly and they pause for a 1 Mississippi count and they do everything right. A big thing though, and this just comes down to like your overall people skills, is that you have to listen to how someone talks about their technique when you ask them about it. There are a lot of verbal and nonverbal cues that just are intrinsic to the way people say things and how they communicate to you that can speak the world. Now, I am going to keep that to myself just because I can't give away all my secrets, but you have to just try to interact with as many different kinds of people as possible. Just people from all kinds of different backgrounds. People that you agree with, people that you don't agree with, people that are the same race as you, people that aren't the same gender or sexuality as you. You have to be able to pick up on those nonverbals and then be able to discern them no matter how they are delivered to you. So different kinds of people are going to say the same thing in a different way. But it all ultimately comes down to, they're saying this about their deadlift, I'm going to prescribe them this just to help them out with that mentally. Or they're saying this about their bench press. They said it different from this guy because they're blah, blah, blah. All right, here's what I'm going to have them do. That will, in of itself, set you apart from 90% of coaches. This programming knowledge will set you apart from 90% of coaches. But that especially will set you apart from 99% of coaches, bar none. If you master that, all of this stuff almost doesn't matter if you can understand people, because then you can change accordingly. An example I put on the presentation, just specifically, we talked about pause deadlifts, is if you have a nervous, over-analytical lifter that just over-analyzes everything, typically they will have very bad technique because they're just overthinking things. And then when you overthink things, you always forget something. You may forget to retract when you're coming down on bench press. You may forget to brace effectively on deadlift, so on and so forth. So for individuals like that, cluster sets are very effective, just because cluster sets are essentially, you take a set in rep prescription, so you'll have 70% and then you'll do 10 singles with it, but you're focusing on perfect technique. So if you're like, hey guy, hey dude, whatever, we have 10 singles at 70%, the focus is going to be on working as slow as possible. There's no time limit on this. What I'm looking for is your form. If your form isn't right, don't count the rep. Send me the videos, or if you're training with them in person, you're going to watch, and then you tally it up. Like, okay, out of 10 singles, you did 4 correctly, and here's what you consistently did on these singles. Or if they did really good, they're like, 9 out of 10 singles, you did really good. What you did today, keep doing that. It's just for example. So determining volume tolerance is going to be, I believe it's the last thing on the slide that I have here for you. It's the last before determining accessories and then your exercise order. Determining volume tolerance is going to tell you the extent at which you can push this individual in terms of training volumes. Ask for training logs, typical exercises that they used, volumes and rep ranges that they used, how often they did something. All of that is important data, and the more that they can tell you, the less that you have to test them when you first get them on, and the more that you can just competently and successfully program for them, because it'll be less experimentation and less getting to know them as a trainee. Irrespective of volume, though, how they recover from their volume in their training is really important as well. So ask them, hey man, how many hours do you sleep per night? How many calories do you eat? How stressed are you typically from work, life, your girlfriend broke up with you, your dog ate your homework, blah, blah, blah. All of those things can make volume work either more or less productive. So if you have someone with perfect everything, you can use the most volume possible. However, none of us are perfect, so you'll never be able to use the absolute best volume that you can possible unless you take care to literally eliminate most stress from your life, sleep 8 or more hours a day, and then eat well. Sleeping and eating are well within your control. How stressed you get, not as easy, but you can always eat and you can always do things to help you sleep better. So you can darken your room, you can turn the AC on, you can turn your TV off 2 hours before. A lot of people who say that they have problems with sleeping don't, and I'm not a doctor, but what I've found typically is it's not that they have necessarily problems sleeping, it's just that they do things that make going to sleep harder. So, your TV's on. Dude, turn your TV off. Stop looking at your phone. You said your room's real hot. How do you expect to sleep in a really hot room? Oh, my room's, I got the light on, or the windows are open, or blah, blah, blah. Well, put some shades on, some curtains on. Make the room dim and cool, then turn your phone off and you'll get better sleep. Not necessarily guaranteeing optimal sleep, but going from 4 hours of sleep to 7 hours of sleep is a huge improvement, and it'll carry over well in your ability to recover. From there, you just determine their minimum effective volumes, and then later on during their training progression, as you escalate their volume, so on and so forth, you'll have determined their maximum recoverable volume as well, maximum effective volume. So like the most that you can do and get a return on it. People have a maximum recoverable volume, to mean you could push them more and you not get any benefit, but it's not detracting either. You kind of want to stay in that sweet spot. All of that helps in determining specific effective rep and set progression. So you'll have things that you try. You can't account for everything just because I'm not a computer algorithm that can look into your body and say, 25% stress on body and blah, blah, blah. And they ate 25.73 calories and they slept this amount of hours. Like, you can't account for everything, but you can predict pretty well based on these metrics. Also, as well, just generically, some lifters will respond better to low volume, others will respond better to higher volumes. And then being able to determine what kind of lifter that you're working with is very important, because you don't want to give a high volume lifter a large amount of volume at the beginning of a training block when they don't need it, because that doesn't really give you anywhere to escalate to. Likewise, if you have someone that has really good work capacity just to start off with, you don't want to give them a lower amount of volume than what they need, because they may regress in performance. That's why you ask for training logs, and then you have a discussion with them. Everything starts with a consultation. If you're not doing a consultation with people that you take on, as you're training your buddy or whatever the case may be, you're a trainer, you're a coach, or if you're not self-assessing, you're not consulting your own notes and then looking for a trend, you're doing either yourself or whomever you're training a disservice, because you're not selecting for what's important for them. And it may not always be purposely, but that consultation where you're like, hey dude, all right, I looked at your training volumes, looked at your training logs. Your strength was a little better here when you were doing less volume. And this was consistent over these many months. For our training blocks, we're going to put the volume here. We're going to bring down that fatigue. We're going to let your joints and your tendons recover a little bit. And then we're going to progress that from there. That volume that you were doing right here, though, had you weaker than there. And you were doing twice as many sets on X, Y, and Z exercise. So we're not going any higher than how you started off there. And we're going to use these exercises. These are the kinds of conversations that you need to have with people, or look at your own training and have with yourself and be objective. Objectivity is the biggest thing when you coach yourself. I do not have a strength and conditioning coach. I am a strength and conditioning coach. But there are coaches that have coaches because they can't be objective with their training. It's not a weakness, but for you to program effectively for yourself or for others, you need to be an objective person. The last thing is determining accessories and then assigning your exercise order. Now, exercise order and specific accessories, the order that they're used on each day is the first step in making the actual split after determining, like, hey, today is going to be a bench day, today is going to be a squat day, so on and so forth. The idea in general is to order them in importance. So if your goal that day is it's a primary deadlift day, you're going to deadlift with a primary deadlift variation that day, and that's going to be the biggest exertion that you have that day. And everything else after that is going to feed into it synergistically. Now with pressing specifically, so if you overhead press, if you're like a strong man, or if you want to bench press, you stagger each press with a pull. Like a row, a pull-up, a pull-down. That is just to give your pressing muscles the maximum amount of rest in between each pressing exercise, as opposed to saying, oh, hey, like today we're going to be doing bench press, pause weighted dips, and then dumbbell bench or pec flies. We're going to do those back-to-back, and then we're going to work your back out. Yeah, you can do that. However, your fatigue from each pressing exercise, you won't be able to recover in the middle of your workout enough to account for the fatigue. Whereas if you stagger them with like a row after your bench press, you drink some Gatorade, your general carb and energy levels are back up, and your pressing muscles got longer time to rest, you can push that next chest exercise harder. That's going to help you build more strength, more size. It's shown in studies. I'm not going to cite them. Google it if you don't believe me. It just works 10 times out of 10. And it's so simple, a caveman could do it. Obviously, if you're doing more weight for more reps at the same exertion, you're going to get a better training effect from it. You do less weight at less reps at the same exertion on the same exercise, you're going to get worse training effect. Hamstrings, and this isn't just like a one size fits all, right? It depends upon their goals. But something that you could do for guys that are more in like the bodybuilding sphere is that you can put hamstring work before your quads. So meaning you trash their hamstrings before you have them squat, either on a Smith machine or do leg press or whatever. You'll find that squat work is going to be a lot more brutal. You know, you're going through a full range of motion and doing a lot of reps. It's going to be a lot more brutal than a hamstring curl. So your hamstring work may suffer after doing your squat work versus the other way around. Another thing that I keep in mind is, depending upon resources that they have available to them in machines and different exercises and equipment, so on and so forth, how I can fit restorative exercises after their hard leg compound movements. So, for example, a restorative exercise for me, after something like let's say I have a guy like myself, for example, what I'll typically do after a heavy set of Romanian deadlifts, which, for me is upwards of 400, 450, 500 something pounds for reps, I'll do something that decompresses my spine, because my lower back is fried, my hamstrings, my glutes are fried, and I still have other hip hinges I need to do in that workout and my primary deadlift day workout. I just want something to help stretch my back out a little bit, have it feeling a little more loose. So I'll do something like a lat pull down or a weighted pull up or something of that nature, just to help restore that area a little bit. And I say that, you know, that's breaking it down Barney style. What it does, it's not actually restoring everything. It's just kind of like a, if anything, at the very least, it's like a placebo. But it does, decompression does offer like a token amount of performance benefit as well, in like an intra-session in the middle of your training session capacity. Decompression work long time will increase your performance long term. The effects are less pronounced in the middle of your workout, but they're still, you know, valuable. And then as well, just that pulling exercise is giving my lower back and stuff more rest. So it's a 2-for-1. One thing that you can do, and this is the last thing that we're going to talk about before we go into like the meat and potatoes of the programming and the actual training splits, is that you want to look to see things that you can superset. Guys typically spend too much time in the gym. If you're training for 2 hours in the gym, you should be at such a level of strength that you need to train 2 hours in the gym to meet the volume requirements that you train in. I train for typically an hour and a half or 2 hours in the gym, just because I'm very strong and I've been training for a long time. However, if you're a guy that's more, you know, beginner level, more intermediate, you want to be looking to see things that you can superset. I superset things and still end up in the gym for 2 hours. But for you guys that need to do less volume and less total sets to grow, supersetting everything is going to keep you in the gym at 45 minutes to an hour tops. So that means you superset things like bicep curls with tricep extensions. You put abs after things that aren't main exercises. So if you're not doing a bench press, a squat, or a deadlift, you're throwing in your ab workout after like rows or something like that, and then you're resting. Just things, time savers, guys. People at the end of the day, obviously you want them to get the best results possible, but you also have to keep in mind that if they're not like a college student or they're living at home with their parents, that they have things to do. They have jobs, they have families, they have other responsibilities. Maybe they have social lives that they want to attend to, and they just don't want to spend all their time in the gym. Time saving is a big, important thing that I think about when I program for people. And is the last thing that we're going to talk about before we move into the meat potatoes. So a typical training split, and this is systemic, my systemic approach to it. I do not believe personally, even if you're a power lifter, that you need to focus on all 3 compound lifts in an off-season training program. And then, you know, also that if you're just training for general size and strength, you don't need to focus on squat, bench, and deadlift. That doesn't mean you don't work the muscles used in them. It's just that you offer training resources to one of those upper body lifts and then one of those lower body lifts. So you're doing either, for example, a bench press and a squat. Those are your main things that you're basing your training days around, and everything else is just accessory to that. Or you're doing overhead press and squat, or you're doing bench and deadlift, which is what I do typically. Overhead press and deadlift, so on and so forth. You have your primary days after you select your 2 movement patterns that you're going to train primarily. You have a secondary day that goes along with that. Now with your primary day, it's primary not necessarily because it comes first in the week, because 1,000% of the time it comes after your secondary day in terms of like the day of the week. It's just the most fatiguing and where you're focusing the most on progression. And it's just going to be the day where you're stronger overall. Why is that? Because a primary and secondary day setup, just in general, will set up a pattern of recovery that your body will exhibit if you haven't had it already. So if you're doing 2 secondary workouts at the beginning of the week, they have less training importance. So you're not pushing load as much here, or not as much volume, and you're putting all of your allocation towards these primary, for example, bench and deadlift days. After you do all that bench volume and then you're heavy deadlifting this day, it would not make sense for you to have something like primary bench Monday, secondary deadlift Tuesday, secondary bench Thursday, primary deadlift Friday. Why? Because your deadlift volume is going to then bleed into your primary day on Monday, and your primary day where you should be the freshest in terms of your upper body is now going to be inhibited by fatigue from your deadlift day because you just destroyed your body with deadlifts on Friday. Versus, okay, primary deadlift, primary bench, they're next to each other. And then after the weekend, I'm coming back and I'm just doing like a medium bench workout where I'm not even going the hardest I can anyway. And it's not detracting at all from anything because the secondary day is just accessory to the primary day. You're focusing on being as recovered on those primary days as possible. So that's also why you have the secondary deadlift day next to the primary bench day, to make sure that your deadlift is as recovered as possible. Right? So, all that being said, keep in mind secondary days are supplemental. You're typically weaker on those days. That's okay. They're supplementary. You're pushing progression on them, but you're pushing progression in a state where your strength is suppressed by your fatigue, versus your strength is always going to be suppressed by your fatigue on a training program until you taper off the fatigue, but you'll be less fatigued on your primary day and thus stronger, and that's the day you want to focus on. Heavy work, in terms of where you primarily put it at, is going to be different depending upon if it's an upper or lower body lift. Heavy work in terms of your upper body days is going to be put on your secondary upper day in terms of singles. Why? What do we know about training maxes? 90, your upper threshold of strength, so like 90% or more, that's going to vary depending upon the day anyway. Why are you doing a heavy single? We'll talk about this later in the lecture, but you're doing a heavy single because you want to maintain a level of fitness and strength to then allow you to program percentages on back downs and just keep an overall level of performance. You're not necessarily doing it to increase your strength. That's what the rep work is for in your primary and your secondary days. That's what's increasing your strength. But it's a little different just because of the way the training split is structured. Your heavy rep work for your lower body is going to be done on your primary day. Why? Because we need to have that heavy, you're doing probably twice or three times the amount of tonnage on your lower body lifts as you are on your upper body day. So you're not going to want to do your heavy work on a secondary deadlift day and then 2 days later have to primary bench, versus if you do it on a Friday and then you have the rest of the day Friday, you have Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You have 5 days to recover from that heavy stimulus before you have to bench again. It's just a better setup. Another reason, just beyond the recovery aspect, is that you can benefit from post-activation potentiation, which is a science term for people that don't know it, that basically means when you lift something heavy, anything that you lift lighter than that is going to be easier. So like the classic example, you have a baseball player, right? They have a big, donut at the top of their baseball bat that's weighted. They swing that, they practice, they take it off, and then their bat feels like nothing. Your upper body can benefit from that scientific principle because there's less range of motion being used than in your lower body lifts, and likewise less load as well because you're lifting it with your upper body versus your legs that are stronger. Your legs being stronger make it so that any post-activation potentiation you get, look at that as you took 2 steps forward and then the fatigue that was generated from that made you go 3 steps back, versus 2 steps forward on your upper body and then fatigue makes you either go no steps back or 1 step back. So you're either +2 or +1, versus on a lower body lift, you're -1. So you want to keep that away from your other primary deadlift work that day. Just in terms of how you want to think about them specifically, this is just succinctly how you would organize everything in terms of this goes here and this goes here. Secondary upper day, you're going to have a heavy single and then your applicable bodybuilding work. Secondary lower day, less specific variations of your lower body lift, and then bodybuilding of whatever lift that you're not training that. So if you're primarily deadlifting, that's where you would put in bodybuilding work specific to squats. It'd be like Smith machine squats or leg press or belt squats or whatever. A day of rest. A primary upper day. You have a self-limiting specific variation of whatever upper body lift that you're doing, and then your bodybuilding work. So by self-limiting, I mean something like you're doing something to make the exercise harder so that your muscles have to work harder, so that when you remove that, you're stronger. Larson press for bench press, long pause bench, pause deadlifts, pause squats, things like that. Same thing with the primary lower body day, heavy singles or heavy rep work. So like if you're deadlifting, do your 3 sets of 10 at 80% on this day, and then your applicable bodybuilding, and then you get the weekend to rest. It's a classic upper lower split, but the way that it is measured and organized is different because each day has a specific goal. So from here, we've talked about thought processes. We've talked about everything from the here, who, why, what, and how, who done it. We're going to talk about how to arrange specific primary bench, deadlift, squat days, depending upon range of motion, and then give the rationale with each exercise. No other coach on YouTube or anywhere else is going to go this in depth with programming as I'm about to give for you now. So if you have the discernment to be able to look at this information and utilize it, you'll have gotten as much value as you can, failing just you hiring me. So this video is very valuable. If you wanted to pay for my coaching and just couldn't afford it, or you have other financial responsibilities, if you watch this video, like I said in the intro, and you can apply the information and absorb it and digest it and utilize it in your own training and think better, it's going to be super valuable to you. It'll be the next best thing versus hiring me. So we'll just talk about the primary bench for the long range of motion, just because I have long range of motion on bench press, and it's just what we're going to talk about first. My first exercise, and what I would put first for someone like that, is a feet up bench press, and that's going to be either touch and go or paused. Right now, I'm pausing everything. Nothing is touch and go in my training. We are going to stagger that with a vertical pull. My idea is that because primary deadlift is the day after, I want to have some decompression work in there afterwards. Or even if you're squatting afterwards, you're going to decompress your lower back. From there, I'll either put in an overhead press or a slight incline bench or incline bench variation. If I'm cutting, like I'm cutting now, I'm cutting fat, my strength isn't necessarily lower. However, my volume tolerance is lower because my recovery capacity is lower because I'm eating less food. So I'll overhead press versus doing a slight incline bench. Just to help accumulate more tonnage through the horizontal pressing pattern or vertical pressing, while also differentiating it from the feet up bench. I can't do 20 cents of feet up bench. If I could, I would. Then I do some sort of cable or machine row. I still want to work my upper back, my lats, everything just from a bodybuilding perspective. However, I'm trying to spare my lower back as much as possible. From there, I may finish up with weighted dips or weighted push-ups, whatever I feel like I need at the time. So right now, I'm doing a lot of weighted dips. However, I'm finding that the lighter that I get, I'm 181 pounds as of the recording of this video. I'm finding that the lighter I get, the less sets of weighted dips that I could do just because of the range of motion that it puts on my pressing muscles. Push-ups offer a similar benefit to the dips, however the range of motion is just shorter, so it's less stressful overall in terms of my recovery capabilities. Then, I'll typically, for someone like me or someone else, finish up with whatever token bodybuilding work that you want to do to just finish off the day. So it could be something like side lateral machine or abs and biceps or whatever the case may be. That's a good primary bench day for someone that has a long range of motion. And as we defined in the intro, long meaning your upper arm is below parallel with relation to the floor. So if you have long arms and you have an above parallel ROM bench, don't watch this video and then come in the comments saying that these variations didn't work for you. That's not what I told you to look for. I told you to look at your upper arm. If it's parallel, normal. If it's above parallel, it's short. And then if it's below parallel, it's long. That's what you want to look at, joint angles. We're going to move next into a primary deadlift day for a long range of motion puller. So someone, again, like myself, just on YouTube, I'm trying to think who else has long range of motion on their deadlift. Swole Fesser, Marcellus Williams, he has a long range of motion on his deadlift, and this is typically along the lines of something that he would do as well. I always open up with a Romanian deadlift. I'm going heavy with these, right? And I'm focusing on accumulating volume with a variation of pulling that for me is harder. Romanian deadlifts are typically harder for most people because you're undergoing twice as much range of, not range of motion, but time under tension. Most people, when they do deadlifts, they completely just ignore the eccentric, because you should, on a deadlift, ignore the eccentric to move the most weight possible for the most amount of reps. However, on a Romanian deadlift, all right, it may feel the same in terms of difficulty on that single, but if you do a double or a triple or you go up to 10 reps, it's going to get incrementally harder the more reps that you do, just because it's so much more time under tension. So plan to do less reps on the same weight with a full range of motion Romanian deadlift where you're lowering to 3 or less inches with the ground, basically enough to make your back undergo a large degree of extension, so almost as much as it would go into under a deadlift. From there, my lower back's fried from that typically. So there, I'll either do something like a leg machine or something with low or no axial loading. So that could be something like leg extensions. It could be something like hack squats, Smith machine squats, lat pull down, weighted pull-ups. After I do that, I give my my hip hinge, like my back, it's not typically your hamstrings that'll be super tired after your hip hinges. It'll be your lower back and your hips, and just general fatigue from lifting a bunch of weight. I give myself even more systemic rest just by doing some hamstring curls. And then after that, I'll finish it off with more volume from a leg machine with low or no axial loading, because again, when you have a long range of motion in your deadlift, your lower back is just undergoing more range of motion. What is that? That's more time under tension, that's more fatigue, that's more stress. So you need more rest from it. And then I'll finish off with like a bodybuilding style stiff leg deadlift or back extension. Primary squat day for someone with a large degree of back extension is going to start with a pause squat. Again, whatever the case may be, whether you have a large or short range of motion, you're doing some sort of self-limiting version and then accumulating volume with that over time. From there, you're doing back extensions, not necessarily for like strength accumulation, but more so because when you do a back extension, it allows you to get a good amount of blood flow in that area, which is going to be really important for recovery and things of that nature. From there, you have your decompression work and extra leg volume with belt squat, and then further decompression work from weighted pull-ups. And then you're just doing what I call insurance work for large back extension squatters, because typically people who have large degrees of back extension in their squats, they also will have like a larger like a wider stance with. So their glutes and their adductors are getting worked to a larger extent as well. Again, just like with the back extensions, you're not necessarily going for the most weight that you can do. You're just moving these muscles through a range of motion and working the tendons and working the blood flow, and just it's a insurance policy just to make sure that like you're not going to get injured when you accumulate volume and load in those main compound lifts. So we went through the long range of motion guys. I'm now going to talk about the more medium range of motion guys, because there are a million YouTube videos that give specific prescriptions with guys for average leverages, because the average person is going to be typically what gives information on YouTube. There's enough information for you guys. I will at some point make a separate video for you specifically, but in terms of arranging specific training splits, I just wanted to talk about the atypical individual. So someone with either short, really advantaged range of motion that just needs extraordinary prescriptions, or someone with a less advantaged range of motion that also needs extraordinary prescriptions. So a primary bench day for someone with short range of motion is going to start, for their self-limiting version, either a floor press or a feet up bench. Where I'm doing it because I'm doing it to remove the leg drive and make it harder in that respect, the range of motion for me is the same no matter what, because I don't have an arch and my arms are just long relative to my body. So my arms come way down when I touch the bar to my chest. Someone with a large, or a short range of motion rather, is doing a floor press, because like we talked about, a floor press is the great equalizer in terms of range of motion. It's going to make them come to parallel, and they're more than likely going to be able to touch their chest on a floor press. If there's someone that is above parallel on a bench press, but they're not like super advantaged, feet up bench would be a better option, just because that less advantaged person that has a little bit more range of motion might quite not touch their chest. But both variations eliminate leg drive. They put them through a larger range of motion, but not so large that their pecs are overstretched. You kind of want to reserve those things for like your smaller movements where you're using less load and less volume. From there, you got to think. Typically, when you have someone that has a large range of, or a short range of motion on their bench press, they're using a large arch. So they're arching their back a lot, and they are relying a lot upon their glute strength, their quads, their hamstrings, but also their upper back stability, and how much stability they can keep in their neck, and how hard they can press their neck and their upper traps into the bench pad. The best variations to do for this slot in terms of back work are rowing variations that mostly give you a good stretch and range of motion on that upper back. Meadows rows and dumbbell rows are the best to put right there. I'd prefer Meadows rows just because they feel a lot better and they're easy to get through that consistent range of motion, versus like the dumbbell rows, you kind of got to have good body awareness and be able to teach someone to hey, give yourself a complete stretch at the bottom, protract your shoulders fully and let your upper back stretch, and then pull to your hip, and then hold that contraction at the top, and then give yourself a full stretch by protracting back down. That's more that you have to coach versus just them doing a Meadows row, and just the fact that the bar is put into the corner like in a landmine setup, that'll just do that intrinsically. From there, since it's a primary bench day and their competition style bench press is going to have so little range of motion that it's not that they don't have to worry about fatigue when it comes to their heavy rep work, because they still do have to manage fatigue with it, but they can do something like a bunch of heavy sets on floor press or feet up bench, and then do heavier clusters with less range of motion on their competition lift. So if you can arch really good and you only have to move the bar 2 or 3 inches on bench press, you can do cluster singles to maintain the proficiency in that capacity, and then also give yourself some extra, volume in that capacity, and not lose anything from it. in terms of recovery. Now, this is just in an off-season capacity, because typically people who have really advantaged bench presses like that, they are power lifters. So this is more of an off-season capacity for this particular split in particular. Obviously, as you specify or you get ready for a meet, you may instead replace, in terms of training importance, you'd put the competition style bench first and then do that for volume, and then, allocate the feet up bench work to somewhere else or on a different day, or just bench more days. This is just a general strength perspective I'm talking about in this video. From there, like I said, upper back cable rows are really good for working that upper back specifically, while also, just like with the last primary bench day, limiting that lower back fatigue, especially since just intrinsic to having a big arch on your bench press, it's not necessarily subjecting your lower back to any load, but that position is stressful. There is muscular contraction that's going on that, can accumulate over time that you want to take care of. Hammer strength chest press can be used here, as well as dumbbell benching. I didn't put that on the lecture, but this is really good just because it's the one movement in someone's program like this, either that or dumbbell bench, that you would want to use that's going to give them a more full stretch on their pecs. Why I like this better than dips for this purpose, because you can use this here as well, is that it has a distinct range of motion. You can only go but so far on a hammer strength chest press, and I even like it better than dumbbell bench for the same reason. But you can potentially go too low or lose control of the dumbbell and overstretch your pec, hurt yourself or whatever. Likewise, on a dip, you can go too low, same thing. Weighted crunches or like an ab wheel is something that I think is really important just for big arch bench pressers, because you have to rely a lot on your core contraction to keep, everything going from your legs to your lower back to your abs, and then eventually keeping your chest and your chest extended and your upper back pressed into the pad. Abs are a really big component in making that chain strong. It's typically a weak link in everybody's chain, and it's just something that you want to shore up, especially if you're going to be relying on a compensatory strategy like that. Because as I stated in the beginning of the video, it's absolutely a variation of bench press where you can use more load in terms of pounds on the bar. However, it's not necessarily easier to perform just because you can use more load on it. If your technique goes awry, if something happens, your leg drive gets messed up, your big arch means nothing because you're not going to be able to utilize it. We're going to finish up with the primary deadlift and squat days, and then we're going to talk about a few more just conceptual things that I think about more so after I've been training with someone for a while. Going through the primary deadlift day for the really advantaged deadlifter, so they have not only a short range of motion, but their back goes through a small amount of back extension. You're going to do your competition style heavy rep work on this day. If you can do 3 sets of 10 at 80%, 77%, you absolutely should be doing that, because it's going to have the most carryover to your 1 rep max, because it's closer to your 1 rep max than 70% is, which is what you typically do for a 3x10. Fact is, you can recover from it, 1, and just be able to do it at all, 2, because of the short amount of range of motion you have. So after that comes belt squats with the deadlift stance. This does 2 things that are just like, it's almost cheat code. It's almost a cheat code. It gives you the ability to train your leg drive specific to your deadlift, while also reducing lower back fatigue and getting free squat tonnage on top of that. It's sumo deadlifters are typically the individuals that have the most advantage in terms of like a powerlifting capacity, because the accessories that they can use may not build the most strength in terms of, okay, we'll do a conventional deadlift and blah, 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 and flatten your back out. Yeah, it won't carry over to that, but specific to what they're doing, Their accessories do so much and encompass so much. Belt squat's one of those accessories. Hamstring curls are just really good for not only general, bodybuilding purposes, but for preventing any injuries, and just like I said with the hip abduction and hip adduction, it's like insurance work. It's just something that you want to do. Barbell rows I put on a primary deadlift day just because of any lower back fatigue that I'm going to have on their training program is typically going to be on the day where their lower back is most likely to be fatigued anyway. So I'm just going to give them the most amount of time from working their lower back to a large extent as possible. Likewise, going to have those hanging leg raises in there because that's rotating your sacrum. You're hanging from the bar, it's decompressing your spine, and then it's also strengthening your abs as well. All really important for the really advantaged deadlifter. And then finally, we have how you arrange a primary squat day for someone with really good squat leverages. So they have little to no back extension. You're not looking at their depth on the squat. You're looking at the amount of back extension that they have on that squat. Paused high bar squats. There's no reason not to do them. Because your back isn't going into extension, you can train your quads and squat based movement patterns a lot more. Why? Because your quads are very resistant to volume. They're probably the most resistant muscle on your body when it comes to volume, next to like your shoulders and your upper back. Like you can really like destroy your quads with volume and then recover from it. You won't recover in other places, but your quads will be ready to go. So by that token, there's no reason why you shouldn't be doing pause squats here. It's specific to what you're going to be doing because it's still a high bar squat. You're just pausing, so it's a little harder. You're still going to want to have your decompression though, because like no matter what your advantage is, you still want to reduce acute fatigue. So the weighted pull-ups are going to decompress your lower back. Not only that, they're going to strengthen your upper back and your shelf. People don't really think of weighted pull-ups as like an upper back exercise, but they really are. All vertical pulls, you can't pull, or not that you can't, but most people don't typically pull straight up and down in a vertical plane. There's a degree of horizontalness to the movement pattern. So you're training your upper back there as well. Belt squats they're just something that everyone who's focused on moving the most weight possible in like a powerlifting capacity should do, just because they offer free tonnage through a parallel range of motion. Now, if you're a bodybuilder or you're something like that, here I would put something like a leg extension or a leg press where you can go through a more full range of motion, but for like a powerlifting capacity or like a strength capacity, because that's what I am. I like being big, but I also like being strong too, and moving the most weight I can safely. So belt squats are a better option for powerlifters. However, if you care about muscle building, typically most belt squats don't allow you to get lower than slightly below parallel. Slightly below parallel is a world of difference between like full depth on a squat. It's night and day in terms of weights that you can move, muscle disruption, so on and so forth. Hamstring curls, just like we talked about, are an insurance policy. Not only that, no other movement really allows you to go through knee flexion that works your hamstring. So it's just something that you want to do to build yourself from top to bottom in general. But it's also in like an insurance policy to either reduce injury risk or prevent it entirely. And then hip abduction and adduction is there for the same reason as well. So in terms of arranging the secondary days, I'm not going to go through each day necessarily, but I'm just going to give kind of like a systemic practice, like mental cues that I go through when I program a secondary day, just in general. So there's going to be between 5 or more slots, and there could be more if you want to do extra bodybuilding, or you have something else that you're trying to accomplish that day, or whatever the case may be. You have 5 slots, right? The first slot typically for someone new is I'm going to address whatever mindset weakness that they have, or what, if they have negative self-talk about a certain, deficit in their training, we'll work on that. This will also have a degree of muscular training as well that'll carry over to like hypertrophy and overall strength, but it's mainly just to give them more confidence in whatever capacity that they're lacking in. After that, we're going to do an antagonist exercise and or a back exercise depending upon if it's upper or lower body. 1, just to do bodybuilding, and 2, to give them rest before we do this muscular variation where we're really going to focus on, accumulating volume, getting our reps in, and just going really hard on. Next, obviously, is the muscular variation. How I program this in general, it's percentage based, but it's also as many reps as possible, and it combines RPE. How does that make sense? Coach, that doesn't make sense. Let me tell you why that makes sense. I'm telling you to take 70% of example of your 1 rep max on this lift, or your projected 1 rep max on this lift, and do as many reps as possible up until you're 2 reps away from failure. What does that mean? Okay. Example. 280 pounds is about a 10 rep max on me for pause bench. So if I had an AMRAP with 2 reps in reserve, or like an RPE 8, I'm going to stop at 8. And then the next set, I'm going to do the same thing. Oh, I may be a little stronger my second set, or a little weaker, so I may get 9 reps, or I may get 7. It's just to keep the exertion at an appropriate level, while also ensuring that you're pushing yourself enough as well, and not pushing yourself too much or too little either. This is the main bread and butter of this secondary day. We've already addressed your mindset weakness. Now we're going to attack you muscularly and strengthen you. From there, again, we're going to have more general bodybuilding work. This may be something like a back exercise, bicep curls, hamstring curls, hip abduction, so on and so forth. Again, to give you more rest before we do the last technical variation. The technical variation is going to be specifically kind of like the mindset variation, specifically addressing a technical flaw that you have that maybe you aren't as disturbed by on a mental level, meaning you're not emotionally attached to it. You're like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. This is how it is. Versus a mindset deficit that would just detracts from your performance in ways that go past your performance deficit. And that's how we'll end off like a secondary day, just in general. And, put in whatever exercises you feel like you need to put in these slots. I can't, I'm just giving you my thought processes. I'm not actually coaching you, so I can't tell you what to put here. But based upon what you've heard in this video, you're going to be thinking in the right direction, and then even be able to use some variations based on things that I've just talked about in this video, and then put them in certain places. But that's how you'd end it off. You'd add in any additional ab or bodybuilding work as needed. And then, of course, as training goals change, you're going to focus on more things versus another. So you may do more volume in the mindset stuff versus the muscular stuff, or more in the muscular and less in the mindset, or do the muscular first and then the mindset last. It'll change, and you have to be able to change that as well, manipulate it, know when the time is for that. So the last thing before we talk about progressing with heavy singles and then when do you change the lifts, you're going to talk about how to progress. And we'll keep this succinct just because I want to make specific videos on these periodization principles. Is that for your primary day, you're going to do step loading. So you're going to pick 3 percentages, add sets every 3 weeks, or every week for 3 weeks, and then add a chunk of weight when you move to the next percentage. That's to help you accumulate a lot of sub-maximal volume and then be able to come back over like 9 weeks and be able to add a little bit to that baseline that you had before. Still sub-maximal, but it's more weight, and you're either doing the same amount of sets progression or you're doing an extra rep as well. It's just a really good way of getting in the gym and knowing you're going to do some hard work, but you're going to be able to get through it because it's sub-maximal. Because it's also sub-maximal, it's not going to be as fatiguing as if you're just doing as much weight for as many reps as you can and then trying to push progression there, because then you have to deal with individual factors such as fatigue, how you're feeling that day, how strong you're that day, so on and so forth. Assistance movements are almost always percentage based, and that can be with or without RPE caps, and you'll just increase in weight as needed. As you get stronger, as you get, perhaps your performance is lower that day, you just adjust them accordingly based on RPE and things like that. Kind of speaking to that percentage based plus RPE thing that we talked about on the last slide as well. Accessories are typically increased in 3-week waves. So that's stuff like back extensions, hamstring curls, smaller movements like that, and then stuff like your bicep curls, your calf raises, your ab work, things like that. They're progressed not necessarily in load, but just honestly in the way that I could put it, the most bro way possible. Like, you're just pushing them really hard and then increasing in weight when you can, because you can recover from an all-out set of bicep curls differently than you would from an all-out set of deadlifts, just because deadlifts are more fatiguing than bicep curls. You don't need to work sub-maximally with everything. So this is going to be the last thing before we talk about variation. Like, when do you change things? Progressing with heavy singles, and this needs to be addressed, because quite honestly, people are very emotionally attached to the maximal amount of weight that they can push. So if performance goes up or down, they react emotionally to that. Most everybody does. Here's how you navigate that. Number one, stay in the pocket. What does that mean? You don't go out of pocket. When you're out of pocket, like if I tell you, like, you're out of pocket, you're acting in a way that is not becoming. You're not doing the best thing possible. So when you're staying in the pocket, you're playing it smooth. You're just coming in and doing what you're supposed to. You stay in the pocket with your heavy singles, because when you push load on your singles, that does not make you stronger. You're forcing progression at that point. So you can't say, like, if your goal was to stay however many reps in reserve with a single throughout your whole training cycle, and you push load to the extent where you have no reps in reserve, you can't really call that a PR, because you're not really progressing in that capacity. You're just artificially increasing load. And that there's something that needs to be said, because a lot of people do too much leading into like a competition. They accumulate all this volume, use all this load, and then expect why they don't perform well on meet day. A lot of people got exposed in this Raw Nationals that just came by for that very reason. Like, guys are like, oh yeah, blah blah blah, I'd rather do more than do less and all that. Like, look, if you had done the opposite, and a lot of them have been forthcoming enough to say, like, hey, yeah, I was just doing too much, man. That's why I didn't blah blah blah. All right, don't fall into that ego trap. Stay in the pocket. Progressing on your rep work makes you stronger, not your heavy singles. Training maxes are for general physical preparedness, so that your body is generally able to take PRs, lift heavy in general, and then adjust your rep work accordingly. You only adjust your training maxes when you PR significantly. So like if you've absolutely become like 25 pounds stronger, yeah, you want to adjust your training maxes from there, because 90% at this point is different than what it was. But if you get a little 5-pound PR, the difference between 89% and 90% is minimal. So you can still use whatever load you were using for 90%, even if it's like 89 now. It's still going to give you the same training effect. 1% is not making a difference. Progressing with heavy singles has a lot of objectivity that comes with it, meaning that you have to be objective and be honest and accept the fact that 90% for you one day may feel like 83% one day and then be 100% another day, or 95. And you have to be willing to accept the daily ups and downs, and not look at necessarily your lows as a lack of progress or your highs as you're progressing, but look at trends. Am I consistently getting weaker on these? Because if you are, you need to address your programming. But if you're consistently over time getting stronger and you just have your off days, even if you have 3 off days versus 8 days where you've shown you're making progress, you don't need to change anything. Keep doing whatever it is you're doing. You can't get emotionally attached to the good days or the bad days. You look at your trends and you look at this as data. This is why a lot of people have to hire coaches, because they need someone that can say, hey, look, man, like, I know you're feeling bad today about, the single that was real heavy or that you missed, but look at the trend. Like, you have all this string of strong days where you've been hitting PRs at this exertion. This one bad day was just, you went drinking with your friends, or your girl just broke up with you, you're depressed, your sleep wasn't good, you're not eating. That's why. Looking at the trends in the data versus your feelings is very important with progressing with heavy work. If you cannot be objective about this, you either A, don't need to lift heavy, or B, you need to hire someone to manage that for you. Period. That pretty much covers it as far as the heavy lifts. So the last thing before we leave the video off is just going to talk about, there's all this variation. We're covering all these different joint angles. We talked about all this cool programming stuff, all this cool mindset stuff. When do I change the lifts? Typically, you don't. Overuse injuries do not occur when you're doing minimal volumes per exercise. They come when you do maximal volumes on one exercise. So when you do too much regular benching, you do too much regular deadlifting, and the same movement pattern through the same joint angles, you're going to get hurt doing that. You don't get hurt by doing week after week bench presses in the same variation, and while also varying the load, and then you're doing 3/4 of your volume in another exercise. They get hurt when you do the same thing over and over and over again with large volumes. You can rotate accessories and assistant movements, but only when you need them to employ a fresh stimulus. You don't need to change things for changing things' sake. So, in terms of that, there's no hard, fast rule that I can give you. Again, you have to look at trends in your training. Like, hey, is this making me stronger still? Am I still progressing in this? If it's not stale and you're still progressing in it, why would you change it? If you tell me that you're just bored of doing it, that's not a good reason to change it. You're training, obviously, for a degree of fun, but you're also doing it for holistic reasons at the end of the day, unless you're competing in something, right? So you look at it as you're treating your body well, and you're doing the most optimal thing possible to keep your body fresh. We'll talk about why, people are going to listen to this and I'm like, yeah, not in my head and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, I won't change anything. We're all human. We all just change things sometimes, or do things just for fun. And I'm going to teach you how to navigate that as well. But it's also my job to objectively tell you, you don't need to change anything on this training system. If you use this variety of exercises for these purposes at these percentages for this reason, you won't get an injury because of that. Now, it's not to say it's not going to absolve you of an injury, because anything can happen, but you are least likely to injure yourself on the Berserk Method training system than you are with any other training system, even conjugate. That's the main thing that they talk about is, variation and blah, 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 and I won't get injured. How many guys break their backs on conjugate? I'm just saying. When you're looking at when you have to change something, though, just that aside past us, 1 week is not a sample size. 4 weeks is not a sample size. You don't look at something over the short term and make long-term decisions based upon it. You look at long-term and then make long-term decisions based on it. Look at training blocks, multiple training blocks, 3 or more, and then just change one variable at a time. What did you learn in science class? You change one variable at a time, or your experiment is inconsistent. Or you have control groups that you maintain, or your experiment is inconsistent. But invariably, all right, I don't need to change anything, but I want to change this. I want to change these lifts. First and foremost, you have to accept that you may potentially pick an exercise that will not keep that consistent thread of progression. You just have to be aware and be willing to take accountability with that first and foremost. Is that even if you use these other principles that we're going to talk about, you may not get your desired result. You may regress, you may have made a bad decision, and you need to take that and be objective about that. As with a lot of things in training, what you want to think about, though, to make the variation work is that you use variations that work similar range of motion and do similar things. So you're going from a weighted push-up to a weighted dip, or you're going from weighted dips to camber bar bench press, or a football bar bench when you're using like the cambered side of it that lets you use more range of motion. And then when you switch things, do not flip-flop weekly, like we just talked about. You have to look at long-term changes and how things affect your training long-term, and then make decisions based on that. And then again, always change your lifts one at a time. That has been my complete training system, guys. That's the last slide. Everything is going to be time stamped for you to go through this video and reference it as your first line of defense when you have, like, you know, a situation where you're like, I really want to hire this guy, I really want to use his training methods, but I just don't have the funds to do so. There's no replacement for hiring me. There's a value that you get from working with a coach or someone to make decisions for you that you can't get from any informational piece, right? So unless I like clone myself and, you know, sell that to you, you can't. You're not going to have the coaching experience. But this will give you the best tool possible to be able to make smarter decisions while adhering to my training method, which I think is the best training method, because I just took everybody else's training methods and combined them succinctly into one cohesive system. Everything that I think about has been fully explained in this video. Now, that doesn't mean that it's any replacement for a lot of the nonverbals that I pick up on, changes that I make on the fly, injuries that happen, specific protocols that I would use, or how I would particularly program this for you if you're watching this right now. It's just thought processes, guys. I'm just telling you how my mind works. Leave a comment down below. I hope you enjoyed the video. Share it with your friends. I'll see you guys.